Well, spoiler title if I ever saw one. Why is it so casual, too? Oh yeah, there was just this one time I got killed and reincarnated into a typical video game starting enemy.
And this one time at Bandit Camp?
Hello everybody, I'm Neon Icy Wings. For a while now, I've been meaning to watch more anime, or anything beyond YouTube really, and one thing that caught my attention was That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, which started airing late last year, and I enjoyed what I saw decently enough until a recent episode, sort of unleashed my inner critic, and upon rewatching the show I discovered quite a few things that slime could be criticized for. I still enjoy it, but I'd be remiss to blindly ignore these problems that have held slime back from being a genuinely great anime. Sure, it's decent, even good in some aspects, but I'm here to give my take on what separates the decent from the great as I analyze the flaws of the slime. And spoilers in general, I guess. Spoilers, alright, yeah. Slime is, of course, your typical isekai. Apply just a bit of phlebotum, and you've got yourself a supreme fantasy badass who goes on adventures, meets quirky individuals, and even an enemy or two who threaten his new life. As much as anything can actually threaten him and his quirky mini-boss squad. Unless it's ReZero. The anime opens up with some pretty good animation, all things considered. Just the way our main character moves in these opening few minutes is nice and lively, which might be ironic considering what's coming up. We meet two characters who don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, while some nerd who is our protagonist goes on about how he's content with life and a 37-year-old virgin, all three of them being normal people who don't really stand out too much. The only comparison I'll give to the non-anime versions of Slime is that boy howdy was the manga protagonist an absolute ass at the start. Which I will give the anime, good job on not having an annoying ass of a protagonist. And they chose to cut the spoilerific first page, well, technically first 2 or 3 pages, which showed his slime human form and some of his major lackeys later in the story as some weird waking up premonition or something. Then again, one could just argue the opening theme animation fills that role in the anime version. But I don't know, this being your typical isekai, something feels missing. Ah, there we go! Now we have the stupid time to explain away why our protagonist is overpowered power hour! You see, after he gets shanked, a mysterious voice chimes in and starts listening to the things his dying monologue contains, leading to a form without blood with an absolute stupid amount of resistances. I mean, it kinda sounds techy, so its autocomplete being stupid is a little funny.
電流によるデータ消去、情報不足により失敗しました。代行措置として。
An annoying thing is, he said he'd go harder to get laid in the next life, him being a 37-year-old virgin and all, which led to him getting his predator ability, which is practically the crux of the show at some points. But he never goes on to seek romance of any kind. Liar! Dirty dying liar! At least the first episode of Slime is honestly a visually interesting thing to see, with a visual variety of style to show how our protagonist kind of feels since he's blind at the start of being a slime. No eyes! Despite having almost no setbacks due to his blindness at the start, they at least make it visually interesting, even if it has no tangible reason or effect on the character's story. Honestly, not a lot happens in the first episode. Sure, he dies, becomes a slime, and wanders a cave, gobbling up herbs and crystals, but things only really happen when he runs into someone else in the cave, who teaches him how to see, in quotation marks, by sensing the magic in the air around them, aka some bullshit! It turns out the guy who taught him how to see was a supremely powerful dragon, called Veldora, who is a large ham, and the episode ends with the slime and dragon becoming friends.
First episode, everybody!
What do we know about our main character? He was content with his life until he died and made impossible promises? Seriously, he's a basic bitch. And spoiler alert, he will continue to be basic. Not How To Basic, though, because How To Basic has much more personality than at least half of all isekai characters. Seriously, our main character, as future events will show, has no flaw! None that I see, anyway. He's a fair ruler, doesn't kill anyone, he doesn't have to, goes out of his way to help people. He's a typical nice character with no real flaw 20 episodes into this anime. Just feels kinda lame. But he's functional enough, like, I'm not annoyed at him for any one thing like Kirito or something. So he isn't a bad character, I just wish there was something that made him more interesting than his story, if that makes sense. It isn't so much the character adds anything, so much as he's basic enough to just float along the pre-planned story and not fuck anything up. After watching it again, the first episode is only okay, and that's only because the animation was pretty nice. The different visuals during his blindness, which sadly never returned, were nice. But characters, motivations, action, all kind of fall flat. Humor was decent, I guess, if we count the computer joke. A little obvious, but there's just something funny how solemnly this guy dumps a fully powered on PC and monitor into a bathtub. Why not just take out the hard drive? Why throw in the monitor as well as the PC? The world may never know. The slime and dragon chatted up some more, and an interesting concept is introduced. While it's really only there to make all the good guys overpowered without any investment or character arcs, but it's an interesting idea all the same. Okay, here's how it works. A monster is able to grow in power if it is given a name by a more powerful individual, reminiscent to mini-boss monsters and full-on boss monsters in RPGs. No-name goblins and slimes are easy, but give them a name and BAM! They scary. Making use of this mechanic, which later on just doesn't make sense in some ways, 15 episodes or more in, like somehow renaming a guy with the same name somehow powers him up because someone else gave him the name first and then the slime said his name. How the hell does that even? Veldora names her slimy protag Rimuru, and he goes on to give an extra name to Veldora, calling him Veldora Tempest. And as a thanks, Veldora decides to share this last name with him, and then Veldora gets shelved for the foreseeable future. You see, Veldora was trapped in a very powerful magic barrier, casted by a legendary hero. And since Rimuru is an isekai protagonist, he just slurps up Veldora, barrier and all, and to have his tutorial voice analyze the barrier and free his friends someday. Yeah, he has a built-in Navi, or Fi in this case, called the Great Sage, which chimes in with information on things and stuff and acts as a kind of guide and advisor in some capacity, while being kind of AI-like. Cause we can't have Rimuru not knowing things! Hell, without the Great Sage, the world is determined to streamline as many story beats as possible. Take, for example, how we spend about half the remaining episode or so, not even, getting out of this cave system, which is done less for adventure and story and more just to hammer in, he's not up, guys! He totally has legit reason for being unbeatable, we swear! And that's why we get a small montage of him killing and devouring monsters in the cave, gaining their forms and powers as he goes, so he has plenty of abilities to abuse in the future. And honestly, I wouldn't mind him being Op if they did interesting things with his Op abilities for cool fights against other powerful enemies in the world, but they don't beyond your usual Op protag shenanigans. Either way, he reaps his way out of the cave with some character foreshadowing when he comes across some goblins who tremble before him and take him back to their leader for their elder to talk to Rimuru. From there, he gets them to bow to him as he offers to help them with their problem, dire wolves, and single-handedly heals all the wounded goblins, cause Great Sage Cheatsy Doodles mixed in with the grand convenience that was his boredom slurpathon, which turns out were healing herbs. Let's cut the crap and put a nail in this coffin. This show has no tension. Direwolves invade, Rimuru just destroys their boss, in subpar action sequence no less, and they bow to him as the new alpha. Then he decides to have the wolves and goblins work side by side and even give them names, which makes everyone happy. Oh, that little animation there makes me happy. He goes and names every goblin and is only able to name one of the direwolves before literally the most lazy excuse of what can only be a criticism dodge kicks in. You see, naming monsters costs magic. Oh, I'm sorry, magicules. So Rimuru used too many magicules and passed out, awakening to find him naming the goblins and direwolf caused them to evolve, with the direwolf pack benefiting from just one being named, because toast. He was asleep for like 3 days, by the way. Now to explain why it's a lazy criticism dodge. Ask yourself, why does Rimuru pass out after naming a large group of monsters? The real answer? Because the writer thought to themselves, man, Rimuru's been on a roll. I should probably add something to punish him for upgrading so many monsters in one go. And then proceeded to do nothing with it. And just to hammer home just how pointless this punishment is, later on he names 150,000 orcs in one go. It's a catnap for a bit with no consequence. Every time Rimuru names a huge swath of monsters and passes out, nothing happens. No other monsters come to pick fights, nobody gets hurt. It's just there to say, see, there's a consequence to him doing this thing. When it's only an illusion of a consequence. A hand wave. If you want your character to be op, go for it. Don't over-explain your story like your protagonist being that powerful makes sense. Like there's any kind of tension or investment, and that's a big underlying problem to this anime. If you want your character to be op, you have to make the viewers enjoy them being op, which works in One Punch Man and even Overlord to an extent, either by making the opness cool or funny or have something else on top. But Rimuru is op, no contest. Let's take a look and see how the show handles its fight scenes and generally see if him being op is good for the show. Well, the action can be decent, but a lot of it is kinda slow and broken up that almost comes down to ability spam or one-shot KOs. You see the first opening where he fights a giant snake? That has better action than some of the other action scenes. And, come to think of it, even better action than the scene it's based on. Hell, I've gotten to the point I think the only objectively good action in the show by episode 21 or so was during the fights against the Orc Army and Orc Disaster. Sure, the fight against the ogres was actually pretty cool, but I just feel if more emotional weight or tension was applied to the fight, it would have been much better. Really, Rimuru being op just feels like it slows down the action and takes things away. I think the core reason why Slime feels mediocre compared to what it could have been can be boiled down to two very big core things: impatience and lack of emotional arcs due to that impatience. And I was only able to pick up on that because of a single line of monologue.
この世界に転生して2年
What? 2 years? Bitch, the seasons ain't even changed. Also, a line in a later episode practically contradicts this, implying Milim was kinda a recent thing, meaning that at least a year and a half had to have went by before she shows up. Freaking wonderful! That line hit me on the head and got me thinking exactly how much has been squandered because they have to keep this insane breakneck pace that's breaking my neck as I twist around to see all the opportunity pass this story by. Imagine though, just imagine, if the village was slowly being built over the course of the story. Imagine if, as more episodes passed and threats overcome, you got to see it grow bigger, buildings finished, characters say, hey, that new shop is open now. Hey, insert character has a new business. Imagine if Rimuru was fighting a major threat like a demon lord and taking damage and could have had the thought, man, I just want to see my village, my home become complete. And then he can come home battered and bruised to a finished home in all its grandeur, to see the thing he fought so hard to protect fully realized. But no, they have to go DC Cinematic Universe here and go as fast as possible to try and hit the story beats to not seeing why the story beats were important. As if killing Superman via Doomsday in and of itself should be enough to evoke the same emotions the comic did. The journey suffers for the want of a checklist, as if the story itself is ashamed to exist and wants to finish as fast as possible. Nothing is allowed to sit still. Nothing is allowed to grow. Why let a character actually grow and change when you can just snap your fingers and automatically have them stronger and visually more striking? I mean, wouldn't have Usopp been a much better character if he went from this to this in the course of 2 episodes of, I'm sorry, years? No, of course not. That's stupid. I'm not even asking for Slime to match One Piece in scope or length, by the way. That's insane. But you can't deny that every transformation feels token in its own way. Looking at you, Gabe. And would have been much better if we actually got to know these characters before they changed and the transformations themselves were more gradual or something. But no, why have a long emotional journey where fans can reflect on how much has changed over the course of the story when you can just snap your fingers and have it done? That is the core as to why Slime fails for me. Its problems are all solved the same way. Problem arises, solution is found. If any complication arises, it is always somebody else's fault, and not Rimuru's. Hell, the one time something bad happened to Rimuru, he benefited perfectly from it. But Rimuru and his village never suffer any loss, any damage, not even when faced by a Cataclysm-class monster. Cataclysm. a word that was used to describe this. Cataclysm, set up and knocked down in a 1-2 punch of 2 episodes. 2 1/4. What intentional emotional scenes they try, like the Dwarven King letting go his little advisor, don't work because no time was dedicated to them, and the he was actually wanting to be helpful to his king just rings hollow with the fact all of his demeanor screams shill and egotist. Maybe, just maybe, if time was dedicated to this, with more weight to everything, he could have come across as a guy who thought his actions were genuinely the best for the kingdom. But since it was so quick with no building, it felt like a cheap tactic. Because why earn an emotional payoff when you can just tell your audience, feel something? Oh, and this all but makes Rimuru a Mary Sue in my book. He comes in, fixes 2 problems with no effort, and gets away from a national incident he didn't even start, benefiting from the whole thing with literally no ill will towards him either. And what feels like a handful of episodes later, this is all but undone as well. You can bet your ass this is gonna be a reoccurring thing, where Rimuru in the village suffers 0 ramifications or setbacks no matter what, and if they do, it won't be Rimuru's fault or any of his major allies' fault, and more than likely any damage will be meaningless or practically retconned before too long anyway. The reason I'm this angry is because I can feel the seeds of emotional payoff here. Watching the festival right after Carbidus, the Cataclysm monster, is destroyed gave a feeling of accomplishment on their part, despite the action being subpar for me and the conclusion not clever, interesting, or all that fun. 2 of the most powerful scenes to me are squandered because nothing helps them stand. The fight against the ogres and Rimuru meeting Shizune's friend for the first time would be powerful if they had more emotional weight leading to them, better pacing and so. Instead, we get the Shyamalan wannabe twist with Shizune. Oh, she's the love interest. Nope, she dead. Isn't even that much of a twist if you ask yourself, when is he gonna eat a human because of the opening? Let's also not forget how he was able to cheese his way out of a fight against a legendary hero and a super spirit that were able to seal Veldora away for a long time. Or I assume it was them. Honestly, I don't even see why Veldora is still trapped at this point. It's been 2 years. He already has a bestie that can one-shot Cataclysm level monster. You have no excuse. He's already untouchable. He hasn't lost a single time, whether it be political court cases, super spirits possessing legendary heroes, and even Cataclysm level monsters. He hasn't been set back once. He hasn't lost a single thing, and even when the show tries to show it off like, oh, he was exiled by the Dwarven King, oh, he couldn't defeat the Cataclysm monster. And what came out of those 2 scenarios? He got a master blacksmith and his flunkies,
And later forgiven by the king that exiled him.
and the Cataclysm monster didn't so much as harm a single person or building from Rimuru's village before being one-shot. 70% one-shot, but one-shot all the same, to me. And if the action or tension of these events aren't the focus, but rather character, humor, and emotion, then it still fails. Because the emotions are stunted due to their impatience, so there isn't any emotional arcs. The humor is fine, but they could do so much more if they cut out the obligatory tension and action that were already there, and replace it with more humor or character or emotion. But they didn't, which I can only imagine is because of some need to be faithful to the source material or something. So, I ask, what is this show's core? It isn't the action or the tension, because they go too fast and Rimuru never loses. Even when he loses, he wins. It isn't the humor, because prime opportunity for humor is passed over for action and tension. It isn't the emotions and characters, because the show won't let them breathe or show us when they're vulnerable. Sure, there are quiet-ish moments, but those are only there to info dump onto the viewers. It's never about how the characters feel or how these events affect these characters, but rather how these characters affect those events. Even more so because they just idly mention 2 years have passed with no change in weather and hardly much time spent with any set of characters to establish them beyond their tropes, before we're whisked off to a new plot. Though I guess some people could argue Shizune had some emotion and how she felt about the whole thing, but Shizune's a MacGuffin. Her emotions don't count. but it's like an open-world game. Congrats! You finished rebuilding this village and done all major quests. Time to move on to the next city and ignore all those pesky side quests. It's moments with no ties to any importance. It's story threads left to dangle or be cut short. It's a diddly-dang isekai. Either that or a My Little Pony fanfiction, because dear lord, there's some big similarities. Dude gets thrown into a magical land with uber power where he creates an empire right in front of the world without really trying. Yep, it's an MLP fanfiction. Wait. Oh god, Overlord is an MLP fanfic as well. Seriously, the similarities and shared tropes is really funny. Sad thing is, some of those fanfics surpass these two, and I like that. And I do not like that. And it bears mentioning again. I do like slime. That's why I see the opportunities where it could have been better, because I want it to be better. I want to know these characters better. I want to see these characters kick ass. I want to see this story and feel these characters' pains and joys. But I just can't. Because the ass kicking isn't what it could be, the characters aren't given the time, and the emotions are sent flying through the wind so hard they're fleeting at best. Seriously, I never understand people who say you can't criticize good things. If I didn't like this show, I would have stopped watching and made a video detailing the reasons why I stopped watching it. Maybe.
Good things have flaws. Accept that.
That Time I Got Reincarnated as a slime is pretty good, even though it has its faults. Faults for days! I still think it's worth watching. Some of the action is nice to look at, the character designs are kind of pretty and even iconic to some degree. The animation has generally been pretty good for the most part, at least I haven't seen any animation that I disliked so far. I still adore this landing animation! And you can laugh at its humor, intentional or not, because some things are supremely stupid and other things decently funny. It's still a decent amount of fun, with characters you want to know more about and be around, and has a protagonist well, I don't hate him. Really, wishing a show had more to it is better than some shows could ever do. I just wish that Time I Got Reincarnated as a slime was a bit better. With a few tweaks to the pacing and a bit more focus on character and emotional arcs, and Slime could have been honestly a great anime if not amazing show. As it is now though, it's decent enough to be entertaining, so long as you don't look too deep into it. I rant because I love you, Slime! But yeah, TLDR just in case. Action is subpar in some places and par in others. Characters are basic, but not unlikable. Story goes too fast, and there's no time for actual emotional scenes in this show. But it's still good, it's just sad to see such potential seemingly wasted. Why couldn't we have more of the besties scene? More humorous character interaction or humorous action? No, but seriously, check out Slime on Crunchyroll or some pirate site or something and see if you like it, because most people probably are nowhere near as nitpicky as me and would probably enjoy it without a care in the world. So yeah, what's your thoughts? Do you think I'm blowing this wholly out of proportion and Slime does all these things fine? Is Slime absolutely terrible for some other reason I didn't cover? Do you actually agree with me, or have I swayed you at all? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you liked what you saw, click that like button to give some support. If you want more from me, go ahead and hit subscribe, and maybe follow me on Twitter for occasional art and video links for when YouTube doesn't do its diddly dang job and doesn't send it to your sub box. I've been Neon Icy Wings. Gotta fly!